Understanding mechanics and how the body specifically affects the mechanics and how each person moves is pretty interesting. So we're forced with judging osteokinematics versus arthrokinematics. So when we see movement, the layperson on the field may say, oh my gosh, this guy's arm's moving up. That's osteokinematics. Arthrokinematics is what's actually happening inside the body. So for example, if a guy has what's called a hooked acromion, which is on the superior lateral part on the top and at the end of the shoulder socket, what's called a hooked acromion here, there's going to be less functional space in the shoulder for this guy to take his arm up here into abduction. So that guy may actually have some more pain. Understanding the arthrokinematics are so important, which is why oftentimes the most important question isn't going to be how does that look, but how does that feel? If we can't see something as coaches or as evaluators, but a person is feeling something for whatever in the world it may be, however God made their specific physiology, we need to be aware enough to understand what that's like and how it needs to coincide with their specific movements. So to add on to the last point about mechanics, understanding that they're constantly changing, that they're dynamic is super important. So for example, let's look into the major leagues a long time ago. Sandy Koufax, very famous for what he could do in his short career, but also famous for his very unique delivery and what he could do with the ball. Now, Sandy Koufax didn't actually pitch like that by design. He actually had debilitating arthritis and was in an incredible amount of pain. And his body would often self-organize and try to create ways to maximize force output, velocity, and minimize discomfort, inefficiency, whatever it may be. And that was just a manifestation of how his body could get it done. So to prove the point that it's constantly changing and still super unique is that if a guy were to get up on the mound and be striding across, say by design, so he can have some deception coming out of the bullpen, if he were to be here, he can't train the same way as another guy. In order to get over that front side, he'd probably have to have pretty incredible thoracic extension to get here and up and over. Understanding Q angle and how the femur sits in the leg as relation to the hip and the knee is super important because each body part is so unique and each body as a whole is so unique. So to set these standards and say that this is right and this is wrong may not be the best avenue to pursue. Also, when we're thinking about how to improve mechanics, right, or how to deal with ourselves or deal with another person, I think it's really, really important to consider what big leaguers do and don't do. Now, if we're going to say, hey man, you should do this because big leaguers do it, that's a logical fallacy. That's an appeal to authority. And it's incredibly, incredibly bad because a lot of times we don't have that proper context. As we've learned already, if some guy has a hooked acromion here and doesn't have as much operational space in the shoulder and can't be doing certain things, then what the hell does it matter what a big leaguer does? And we've also learned that just because Sandy Koufax, one of the greatest, does it, I mean, hell, why would you mimic a guy with debilitating arthritis who's, if you'll read in the article, is dumping his elbow into buckets just to get through and get by a day? So I would say this, when understanding how we're going to move, sometimes your greatest biomechanical disadvantage is your greatest performance advantage. And sometimes your greatest performance advantage is your greatest biomechanical disadvantage. And to understand how to weigh that scale and make that decision is always going to be up to you and figuring out how drastic that measurement needs to be. So the demands of the body and the demands of performance are really unique. And I think that brings into question how we're going to go about training. So it's incredibly important to always go through a series of assessments. Now, biomechanical assessments and regular screenings are very few and far between. So to say that you're going to go through a biomechanics assessment, you're going to need thousands of dollars worth of equipment to do so. If not, it's a very watered down version of it. Now, I would say this. If we get back up on the mound here and we're thinking about how we specifically need to train, not only am I going to work around what my body's asking, but say I'm a hip hinge guy and I'm going to throw and be about right here. To be able to maintain this posture and stay where I need to be, I'm going to have an incredible amount of anterior core stability. And at landing, I'm going to need to have a great, great base to be able to have an internally rotated landing hip and be able to function around it and move about that axis. So I'll say this, figuring out what your body is and how it needs to move is awesome, but none of it really matters unless you're training that specific way. Now, there are plenty of awesome trainers all around the country and all around the world who are doing that. But as you'll see in the article, if you read, I really do want to pay credit to some of the guys like Stephen Jones, who talks about how everything is so unique to each person. Brian Kaplan, who says, don't coach the different out of somebody. Annette Cressy's great tweet, as you'll see in the article, about how all the top pitchers have completely different movement patterns and completely different mechanics. So why would the first thing that you do is to change it and homogenize people and go through major mechanical overhauls? A lot of times it just isn't the right answer. So to say thank you to those guys, I think a lot of people need to. And if you're going to improve mechanics, don't think twice about just long tossing. Get on the Jaeger program and figure it out, because there's nothing better than taking those varying degrees of freedom and letting your body just create and experiment and understand what's right for you. Then go to shortstop and chuck a couple things from across the diamond. I think you'll find that you'll get much better very, very quickly. So all in all, I think that we have a lot more questions than we do answers. So moving forward, if you have thoughts or ideas, or if you could even educate me, please let me know, because I'm trying to learn more every day.